Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and hello. This presentation of Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory is brought by team members consist of Khairul Mahyuddin, Rasyidah, Najiha, and Imran. The contents of this presentation will include first, introduction, second, theory application in the real context, third, importance of the theory, and fourth, examples. Introduction. Hofstede's cultural dimensions is a framework for cross-cultural communication. It is developed by Gert Hofstede, a social psychologist from Netherlands and a former employee of IBM. So he gathered over 100,000 surveys from 70 different national subsidiaries of IBM between 1967 and 1973. So for his surveys, his data showed that cultural distinctions did not differ between IBM branches, but between culture of different nations. So he divided these differences into 5 dimensions. Then later on, 2010, he came up with the 6th idea. So these are the 6 dimensions that have been developed by Hofstede. The first one is regarding power distance, PDI. Second, individualistic versus collectivistic. Third, masculinity versus femininity. Fourth, uncertainty avoidance index, UAI. Fifth, long-term orientation versus short-term orientation, LTO. And finally, the 6th dimension is indulgence versus restraint. So I will go into these 6 dimensions in general, and my team members will delve deeper into each of these dimension and what the application in real world is. The first dimension, power distance index, PDI. So this dimension expresses the degree to which the less powerful members of a society accept and expect that power is distributed unequally. So in societies with high power distance, people accept a hierarchical order in which everybody has a place and needs no further justification. While in societies with low power distance, people strive to equalize the distribution of power and demand justification for inequalities of power. Second dimension is individualism versus collectivism, IDV. So this dimension compares individualism, which is a preference for a loosely knit social framework in which individuals are expected to take care of only themselves and their immediate families. And collectivism is a preference for a tightly knit society in which individuals can expect their relatives or members of a particular in-group to look after them in exchange for unquestioning loyalty. Third dimension is masculinity versus femininity, MAS. So this dimension evaluates masculinity, a preference in society for achievement, heroism, assertiveness, and material rewards for success, where difference between gender roles are more rigid. And femininity, a preference for cooperation, modesty, caring for the weak, and quality of life, where difference between gender roles are less rigid. Fourth dimension is uncertainty avoidance index, UAI. So this dimension expresses the degree to which the members of a society feel uncomfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. So societies with strong UAI will maintain rigid codes of belief and behavior and are intolerant of unorthodox behavior and ideas, while societies with weak UOI maintain a more relaxed attitude in which practice counts more than principles. The fifth dimension, long-term orientation versus short-term normative orientation, LTO. So societies with long-term orientation prefer a more pragmatic approach. They encourage thrift and efforts in modern education as a way to prepare for the future, while societies with short-term normative orientation prefer to maintain time-honored tradition and norms, while viewing societal change with suspicion. And finally, the 6th dimension, indulgent versus restraint, IND. This dimension evaluates indulgent, where societies allow relatively free gratification of basic and natural human drive related to enjoying life and having fun, while restraint societies with restraint suppress gratification of needs and regulated it by means of strict social norms.
Okay, let's look at how this theory can be applied in a real context. As you can see from the graph, 4 countries have been selected to compile the 6 dimension theory of Hofstede. The countries are Italy, Malaysia, Singapore and United States. In terms of power distance, Malaysia's score of 100 means Malaysia mindset accept a hierarchy order where there is a gap between boss and subordinate. The challenge in leadership in Malaysia culture are not accepted. While in terms of the individualism, US score the highest one, which are 91, because they hold on to the slogan liberty and justice. People believe they have an equal right in every aspect. Both staff and management anticipate consultation and information are frequently exchanged. Their communication is always informal, direct and actively engaged. In terms of masculinity, Italy scores 70, which means their society values success above everything else. At an early age, children always been taught that competition, winning in a competition is important in a life, and competition among others is healthy. Italians always show their status by purchasing something that can reflect of their status in a life, like purchasing a luxury car, massive house, yacht, or having a vacation in far country from the Italy. Other than that, Italy also score highest in uncertain avoidance dimension, where Italians are very uncomfortable in ambiguous or unknown situation. Italian value familiarity over uncertainty. That's why Italians have very complicated judicial and civil code all over the place. But if a foreigner come to the Italian, they will surprise that Italians don't always follow their rule. In terms of a long term orientation values, Singapore have a higher score, where it's a culture encourage perseverance, sustained efforts and slow result. Singaporean always keep their option open. They didn't stick to tradition but preferred the modern style. The in the indulgence dimension is being scored high by the US. This dimension relates more to how the person was raised. The attitude and behavior of US society can be reflected by a combined indulgence and normative orientation, which work hard and play hard. Such as example, the drug addiction is more common in the United States than in many other wealthy nations, despite the fact that the country has conducted and is still waging a first war on the drug. Other than that, this theory also can be applied in a business negotiation, which we can see in the dimension of high power distance culture versus low power distance culture. Example of the high power distance culture country is Japan, which a negotiator always need to report back to higher authorities before making a final decision, while United States as a example of low power distance, negotiators are allowed to make a decision based on the good of the company without any further consultation from higher authority. You so that the US negotiator always if meeting with the Japan negotiator, they need to be patient and allow for time for Japan to report back and do a group discussion with their supervisor. Another dimension is individualism vs collectivism. We can see Japan is a collectivism country, which member can expect any relative or group member to look after them. They always settle with what the group wants and spend more time in the negotiation process within relationship and focusing on harmony management instead of discussing a contract. While United States is a low power system which are willing to take risks for a bigger gains, and they care more about the benefit of the collective. Other dimension is uncertainty avoidance, which German is a high level index of uncertainty avoidance, which in an ambiguous negation situation they tend to develop mistrust towards their counterpart. While in order to avoid that, they will have an agreement on the negation based on the fact and test. Reliability is very important for their relationship development process. While China, as a low level index country, always persists and obstinate in a negation strategies. Their commercial style can be indirect to shame uncertainty avoidant culture. In masculinity vs femininity, Japan is a feminism which value emotion but have self-control over emotion. In negation strategies, they always prefer discussion and compensation in order to conclude agreement. While in United States is masculinity culture which are they do not value emotion being mixed into negation, and conflict always arise in negotiation to find a winner rather than to reach a mutual beneficial agreement. Long term orientation vs short term orientation, we can see long term is we can see country from the East Asia, Eastern and Central Europe. The companies that coming from this country, we try to capture sustainable investment that pay off over a long period of time instead of contract that provide instant gratification. While company from short term orientation coming from Latin America, United States or Australia, such example, have a high value for past tradition and norms. The suspicion arise when a society change. In terms of indulgence vs restraint, indulgence coming from country Latin America, Western Europe or North America, the negotiators are quicker to form opinion and decision may act upon individual compensation or business goal rather than those from the organization, while restraint coming from the company from East Asia, Eastern Europe and Muslim world, which are negotiation in Eastern society may take longer to reach conclusion and make decision based on organizational goals rather than individual goals.
Okay, thank you, Rasyidah. Now, I'm Najiha binti Azmi. We'll continue the presentation on Hofstede's cultural dimensions, theory, importance. Okay, there are 4 points here. So I will go through one by one. Okay, the first one, it helps in understanding different civilization, culture, and diversity, thus cultural difference awareness. Okay, when Hofstede's model was first introduced, there was little to no studies and research on culture and many businesses. So, with this theory, he shed light on how cultural differences are still significant today in a world that is becoming more and more diverse. Second, international communication and negotiations. Hofstede's cultural dimensions can be used to help explain why certain behavior are more or less common in different cultures, and also can be used to predict how people from different cultures will interact with each other. Third point, it helps organizations to expanding business on an international level with less cultural hindrances. It can be used to help businesses adapt their products and marketing to different cultures. If a company wants to sell its products in a country with a high individualism score, for example, it may need to design its packaging and advertising to appeal to individuals rather than groups. Also, within a business, Hofstede's framework can also help managers to understand why their employees behave the way they do. Another example, if a manager is having difficulty getting her or his employees to work together as a team, he or she may need to take account that their employees come from different cultures with different levels of collectivism. Okay, thus, all the points encourages people to globalize and work together to stabilize the organizations. Okay, moving to the next slide. Okay, despite being successful models, researchers do not find the theory to be accurate. Okay, there are 3 points here on the critics. Here, the first one, the model itself is ethnocentric because it is based on a Dutch worldview, and also Hofstede's work assumes that domestic population is a homogeneous whole rather than paying attention to communities and their ethnics. Second, it is outdated and limited research methodology, as all the dimensions do not provide sufficient knowledge on different social cultures. And critics stated that a study that centers around only one company, which is in this case IBM, cannot possibly provide adequate information on the whole cultural system on a particular country. Okay, the third and the last point, Hofstede's theory has also been critiqued for promoting static view of culture. We are cultures of contradictions. There isn't much room for flexibility if there is framework that tries to put a culture at one end. Individuals are individuals and not collectivists, but are they not also perhaps that there are some third thing? Can they not be both at different moments in their lives or in different contexts? That's the issues here. Okay, so for the conclusion, for my part, even though there is a high level of controversy and criticisms around Hofstede's theory, it still remains the most valuable and pioneering studies on culture for scholars and practitioners. Okay, that's all from my part. Now I will pass this presentation to Imran. Thank you.
My presentation is on an example of usage of Hofstede cultural dimension theory. Like previously mentioned, it is a framework for measuring cultural dimension from a global perspective and a useful business tool which provide insight for organizations looking to extend their business internationally. Understanding of a single cultural dimension or comparing different cultures. Here, the example is between Ireland and the United States. Comparing it would make a certain business or marketing approach is more likely to be successful or fail if the difference is significant enough. Next is KFC Singapore ad. In this ad, the grandma is trying to eat her fried chicken during mealtime with family members. So here it says that no one eats until the oldest members of the family eat. That's the power distance. Individualism, score is low, meaning it is a collective society. Person view themselves as members of families rather than individual, which they eat together. And the masculinity is 48. It's a little bit on the feminine side, which means conflicts are avoided and reaching consensus is more important than being right. Here, the grandma is constantly being disturbed by the members of the family asking, please eat, but she wants to eat, but she has to be polite and respond to the wishes. So she chooses to wear the headphone and avoiding conflict. Next one is about IKEA, the organization. IKEA is widely known as a Scandinavian-style, affordable, ready-to-assemble furniture founded in Sweden. So it is strongly tied to Swedish value. The franchises around the globe are expected to hold similar culture. And we can see when we walk into IKEA store, it looks pretty much the same from one store to another. It has a IKEA Swedish sounding names for the furniture, and also their food is a Swedish related food. There's little localization, even in national culture where the store is being located. So here there's a few examples between Indonesia, Norway, Philippines, and Sweden. Here we can see that individualism is high in the Europe country, Norway and Sweden, and Indonesia and Philippines is a collective culture. So here it means that close long-term commitment and foster strong relationship with members of the group is more important in collective, and Scandinavian countries are more individualist society where they look after themselves and separate their work from their private life. So here we do see that IKEA in Indonesia, the people there do have a IKEA uniform with IKEA colors, but with batik motif to localize the shirt, the uniform. Next one would be an ad about two different airlines. One is a Turkish airline, and the other one is the Finnair. The Turkish airline has a story about a remote part of Turkey where the children is waiting for the airline to come, and when it finally comes, they were so happy. And the message here is that why have international large international routes when it is more important for to connect the people, while the Finnair is more about random pictures about building, cities, food, which maybe international market are more suitable for it, because the Turkish airline is more towards local, the Turkish people itself. I mean, the ad is for them. Next one is Malaysia. According to Hofstede Insight, we have a high power distance, which make Malaysia is more acceptive towards hierarchical order. Everybody has a place and needs a little of justification for it. Malaysia has a 26 score individualism, which means it is a collective society. We can see even when we are addressing strangers here, we call brother, sister, even uncle and aunties when we meet them, even though we don't know their name that well. And we have a uncertainty avoidance score of 36, which means that we have a relaxed attitude, which practice count more principle and defiance from the norm is more easily tolerated. Schedule are flexible, hard work is undertaken when necessary, but not for its own sake. We have a score of 41 in long-term orientation, which means we have a normative culture. People with a strong concern with establishing the absolute truth. We are normative in thinking, exhibit great respect for tradition, and relative small propensity to save for the future, and a focus to achieving quick result. Lastly, we have a score of 57 for indulgence, which we generally exhibit a willingness to realize our impulse and desire with regards to enjoying life and having fun. We can see here where we tend to spend a little bit more for our coffee and cakes, for food, while we are on holiday, we like to spend some money, indulge ourselves, either in shopping and such. So that's all for me. Thank you.